Dr. Margot Lefebvre had spent so many hours in the Archives Nationales that the guards started to wave her through the metal detector without looking up. Her Ph.D. in 18th century patisserie was technically complete, but every brittle ledger, every grease-stained notebook dragged her back like the smell of warm butter. She loved asking questions no one else even thought to pronounce. Which pastry forks appeared first in Provence salons? How did chocolate arrive in provincial convents? Who invented the custard-thickened drinking chocolate that Maria Antoinette adored? On a rain-chewed March morning, she pinched open a gray box labeled simply Maison Charbonneau, 1764-1783. The papers inside were mildewed, the ink spidering across the fibers. Yet one sheet glowed beneath the reading lamp like a theatrical spotlight. The heading read, Cœur éternel, gâteau pour ceux qui s'aimeront pour toujours. Eternal heart, cake for those who will love forever. Margot felt her pulse brush the edge of her collar. She had heard the legend whispered at pastry conferences, the way gemologists whisper about cursed diamonds. Supposedly, Catherine Charbonneau, the pastry alchemist who dazzled both the Bourbon court and the burgeoning bourgeoisie, had developed a cake so sumptuous that couples who shared it would never fall out of love. The tale was always accompanied by winks. Maybe it referred to an aphrodisiac cordial, maybe to absurd quantities of sugar that would have thrown any eater into delirious bliss. Scholars dismissed it as confectionery folklore, yet the vellum in Margot's nitrile-gloved hands declared otherwise. It listed ingredients in a tidy slanted cursive: blé tendre d'hiver pulvérisé à la lune décroissante, poudre d'amande douce et amère, pétales de pois de senteur immortelle, essence d'écorce d'orange amère, and then, poetically, une larme de l'aube prise au premier matin où l'on reconnaît son propre bonheur. A tear of dawn, collected on the first morning one recognizes one's happiness. Ridiculous, Margot thought, yet ice slid down her spine. The final line, however, was written in cipher, a substitution alphabet Catherine Charbonneau was rumored to use for her most precious secrets. Margot copied the page, returned the original, and hurried through the courtyard where rain had turned the flagstones into glass. She knew one person eccentric enough to relish a ciphered recipe. Victor Reyes, celebrated judge on the international show Bake Battle Royale, enjoyed pronouncing historical footnotes between mouthfuls of contestant pastry. The two had met when he invited her to lecture on 18th century puff pastry at the show's holiday special. Off camera, they had argued about whether laminated dough reached its peak with croissants or kouign-amann. She found his flamboyant gestures tiresome. He accused her of academic snobbery, and both walked away laughing. Victor answered on the second ring, voice clouded by airport speakers. Dr. Delicious, to what do I owe the pleasure? I might hold Cœur éternel in my purse, Margot explained, while he abandoned his boarding queue and hid behind a pillar plastered with duty-free ads. When she finished, Victor exhaled one long, television-worthy whistle. Fly to London tonight, he said. Our semifinals film this week. I'll secure studio space. We'll crack your cake in between shoot days. If the legend is half true, imagine it as the showstopper challenge in the finale. Margot protested about grant applications, teaching schedules, humidity differences between Paris and London. Victor brushed them aside. History chooses its hour. Pack your microplane. 2 nights later, she set foot in the Bake Battle Royale kitchen. Lights off, the stainless steel counters ghost pale beneath emergency exit signs. Victor waited beside a printer-sized decrypting gadget he borrowed from the show's puzzle design team. He wore a pea-green bomber jacket embroidered with whisks. Ready to romance eternity? They fed the ciphered line into software written for escape rooms. After several groans and clunks, letters resolved. Verse gold into flame. until it flows the color of regret, then cool it with devotion. Margot scowled. Alchemy, not cookery, Victor grinned. Or simply caramel. They spent 3 hours translating metaphor into method. Gold equaled sugar, cooked deep amber. Regret suggested letting the caramel flirt with bitterness. Devotion must mean rapid cooling with butter and fresh cream so it didn't seize. Combined with almond sponge, candied bitter orange peel, and a syrup steeped with everlasting sweet pea blossoms. Lathyrus latifolius, known in herbals for symbolizing lasting pleasure. They had a recipe. What about the tear of dawn? Victor asked. Margot's answer surprised even herself. A drop of spring rain gathered before sunrise. The humidity sensors on the studio roof have collection dishes. I checked. She blushed under the fluorescent light. At 4:48 a.m., they sneaked onto the rooftop where dawn smeared lilac across the Thames. Margot tilted a silver spoon to catch one dew pearl, balanced on the rim of a dish antenna. She felt absurd, exultant, 17 rather than 37. Victor held out a test tube, solemn as a best man with wedding rings. Back downstairs, they baked. The batter perfumed the dark kitchen with almond and citrus. Yet an undercurrent suggested fields after rain. When the cake emerged, its crust shimmered faintly, almost breathing. They let it rest, glazed it with the bitter caramel cooled to dulcet copper, then sliced 2 wedges. Victor raised his plate. 2 empirical romance! Margot tapped hers against it. They chewed. The crumb dissolved like snowfall against a scarf. Citrus whispered. Almond hummed. Caramel sang bass. And the floral dew stitched everything together with a note that felt uncannily wistful, as though nostalgia met possibility. Margot blinked. The world appeared edged in soft lantern light. Across from her, Victor had gone quiet, eyebrows unarched for once. She felt a tug, a thread looping from her diaphragm to his, across the stainless steel void. She swallowed, throat thick. It's balanced. He laughed nervously. Yes, balanced. Neither moved for several seconds. Then he coughed. Scientifically speaking, we must test reproducibility and legality. The network owns whatever is baked on these premises. We'd need clearance before using it on air. Margot nodded too fast. In scholarly authentication, provenance, comparative analysis, with extant Charbonneau recipes. Both knew they were babbling because words were safer than what pulsed between them. By sunrise, crew members flooded the kitchen. Smells of instant coffee and hairspray replaced almond dawn. Margot ducked out to her hotel. Victor stepped onto set, tossing compliments at terrified contestants with his usual firework verve. Yet every hour he texted her photos. A cake crumb under macro lens, the drape of caramel, a quick selfie where his expression read shy underneath the irony. Margot spent the day verifying the recipe's authenticity. Ink dating, watermark identification. All signs shouted Charbonneau. Meanwhile, the semi-finals filmed. During lunch break, Victor called. Producers love the romance cake legend. They want it as the technical challenge for tomorrow's shoot. Will you present the history segment? Tomorrow, Margot spluttered. They see a marketing constellation. Valentine's specials, tie-in cookbooks, edible perfume lines. But first, we must tweak ingredient list. Dew at dawn isn't exactly supermarket shelf stable. Margot bit a hangnail. Charbonneau's poetry explained the dew index's hope, not moisture. Any liquid added at the precise emotional pitch could suffice. Perhaps orange blossom water distilled at sunrise. Victor responded, That's perfect. One more thing. They want us to demonstrate the completed cake for the contestants' reference. His voice softened. Can you face another slice? That evening, they prepared a version using sunrise distilled orange blossom water. Victor talked the prop team into sourcing from a specialty supplier. They worked shoulder to shoulder, bodies brushing under the hum of the industrial mixer. When flour clouded Margot's sleeve, he brushed it off with his thumb and didn't withdraw. The thread between them went taut, humming. She could recite entire genealogies of Napoleonic pastry chefs, yet no text taught her how to catalog this heat. The second cake rose higher, its crumb creamier. When they tasted it, the world didn't tilt like before, but a warmth spread from palate to palms, as if their blood remembered a shared childhood. Legend or placebo? She didn't care. Show day arrived. Contestants, anxious architects of butter and nerves, clustered around Margot as cameras rolled. She outlined charbonneau, the symbolic language of 18th century recipes, the rarity of everlasting sweet pea. She pretended not to notice Victor watching her from behind a forest of lenses, his gaze an anchorage. Remember, she concluded for the camera, Coeur éternelle is not about sweetness alone. It balances bitterness, fragrance, almond depth. Harmony is the language of lasting love. She refused to glance at Victor, but heard him inhale. Contestants scattered to their benches. Flour flew. Sugar snapped into syrup. Orange peel diced into confetti. Victor and the third judge, Gloria McKay, queen of molecular desserts, circulated offering cryptic encouragement. Margot stood at Monitor Village with producers, observing. Gloria muttered, "You too cooked the reference cake?" A quizzical arch of perfectly microbladed brow. Margot nodded, cheeks hot, but Gloria merely said, "Tasted like confession, dipped in butterscotch." Then she winked. Most contestants burned their caramel, underbaked sponges, or drowned flavors in rosewater. 2 managed decent bakes. When judging concluded, Victor announced, "In seeing these brave attempts, we realized how decisive technique is to this legendary cake. Therefore, Dr. Lefebvre and I will now demonstrate the historical method for you at home." Producers had scripted that line, yet his voice carried a quiver that no teleprompter typed. Live demonstration meant performing before the contestants, still at their benches, cameras capturing every whisk stroke. Margot's hands should have trembled. Instead, they moved as if memory had colonized muscle. Victor managed commentary while measuring, but his jokes sounded tender rather than sparkling. They folded batter, built caramel. At the crucial moment, they tilted the saucepan so sugar thundered inside, rinsed bitterness with cream, and Victor said softly, "Cool regret with devotion." Only Margot heard. Her spatula faltered. Cake in oven. There was a 30-minute wait. The floor manager signaled a break. Crews scurried for coffee. Contestants collapsed onto stools. Victor beckoned Margot to the prop lounge, lined with fake edible centerpieces. They sat beneath a chandelier of spun sugar. He spoke first. "When you read history, you're alone with ghosts. When I judge, I'm surrounded by noise, but alone too. That cake?" He shook his head as though clearing icing sugar from hair. "I'm terrified that it's puppeteering us, but more terrified I'd lose this feeling." Margot waited for the rational explanation she'd rehearsed. Biochemical response to aroma compounds. Psychological priming by legend. Instead, she said, "I want to bake it just for us, without cameras." He took her hand. For once, there was nothing flamboyant in the gesture. "Midnight, my flat. I'll unplug the Wi-Fi. You bring the dough." They returned to set just in time to peel parchment from a golden heart. On camera, they tasted. Viewers would later message about how their eyes lit simultaneously, but Margot remembered only Victor mouthing, "It's you," though he actually said, "It's true." The episode wrapped. Contestants hugged. Producers plotted merchandise. When lights dimmed, Victor whisked Margot out a back door, into night streets, smelling of rain on warm asphalt. They cabbed to his apartment overlooking a square where cherry trees wore green lantern buds. Inside the kitchen stood antique copper molds, signed cookbooks, and a fridge papered with neon post-its of future flavor dreams. Margot set her alarm for 4:30 a.m. "We'll need fresh dew." She hadn't traveled with test tubes, so Victor offered a crystal, cordial glass inherited from his grandmother. They dozed on opposite ends of his sofa, though at some point her head settled against his shoulder, his cheek atop her curls. Alarm. They padded barefoot to the window ledge where a planter of herbs glistened. Margot tilted the cordial glass, collected 3 dewdrops jade bright. They worked in hush, whisking within the lamplight island while the rest of the flat slept dark. No cameras, no applause track. When batter slipped like velvet into the tin, Margot traced the rim with her finger, anointing it with dew. Victor closed the oven door as though baptizing a secret. While the cake baked, they spoke of ordinary things. Her first botched soufflé at age 13, his adolescent crush on Turkish delight, how caramel taught him patience. Steam fogged the window. They stood close enough that breath mingled. Timer chimed. They unmolded the heart onto a wire rack. Caramel lacquered the surface until it resembled polished wood. Victor sliced 2 plates worth, setting them on the breakfast bar. Midnight had passed. Dawn crouched nearby. They ate. Flavor exploded familiar, yet wilder, as if each component were a note in a private dialect only they understood. Bitterness of caramel tasted like the courage to confess pain. Almond evoked the trust of shared silence. Orange peel flashed bright as sudden laughter. The dew, indescribable, stretched the seconds between heartbeats so they could see themselves choosing each other. Margot's fork stilled. "Is this eternal romance?" she whispered. Victor brushed crumb from her lip. "If eternity begins 1 minute at a time." Then he kissed her. No fireworks, no sugar rush. Instead, a calm bewilderment, like standing in a library at closing time, realizing the book you sought was already in your hand. Morning seeped through curtains. They brewed coffee, sliced more cake, watched commuters flood the square. The magic, if that's what it was, did not dim under daylight. Yet they understood. A legend stands only because people retell it. Love stands only because people keep remaking it. They spent the week building scholarly and culinary scaffolding around Coeur Eternelle. Margot wrote a journal article tracing Charbonneau's symbolic ingredients to courtly love rhetoric. Victor developed a home kitchen adaptation, omitting impossible dew, but instructing bakers to pause at dawn and articulate something they cherished. The show licensed the recipe, but Margot stipulated that copies include historical context and a footnote. Sharing this cake cannot cause love, only illuminate what already lives. Producers grumbled, then realized the line sold even more. 6 months later, Bake Battle Royale aired the episode. Social media erupted in caramel hearts and declarations at sunrise. Couples posted side-by-side selfies, captioned, "Our crumb is eternal." Single viewers baked it for friends, parents, even pets. Margot's inbox flooded with stories of reconciliations, new beginnings, bittersweet goodbyes, gentled by almond sweetness. She replied to each, explaining that Charbonneau's genius was to fuse flavor with metaphor, obliging eaters to taste memory and hope together. On the night the finale aired, Victor and Margot watched from the couch of their newly shared Paris flat, his whisks in her crock, her antique copper molds alongside his silicone dinosaurs. Contestants baked towering reinterpretations of Coeur Eternelle, fireworks of mirror glaze and gold leaf. After the winner knelt, sobbing beside an avalanche of applause, the camera cut to the judging table, where Victor quoted Charbonneau. "Love is a syllable in the language of hunger." Home audience swooned. Victor clicked mute. "We could dine out forever on that line," he joked. Margot nudged him with a wool-socked foot. "Better we dine in." She carried from the kitchen a modest heart-shaped cake. No garnish, no glaze. He raised a brow. She shrugged. "Test batch for next chapter." They sliced. It tasted of almond, orange, dawn, and the perilous exhilaration of turning a legend into daily bread. They chewed, swallowed, watched each other for any cosmic shimmer. All they saw was the ordinary luminosity of shared rooms, shared errands, shared silences, eternal enough. Later that year, they donated the original cipher and their annotated translation to the Archives Nationales, along with 2 cordial glasses labeled Collected Due, 5 April, almost sunrise. In the ledger, Margot wrote, "Recipe proven functional. Legend subject to ongoing peer review." Victor added a post-it, "Find someone worth testing hypotheses with." Historians would dissect the culinary alchemy for decades. Television fans would replay the episode every Valentine's Day. Bakers would create vegan, gluten-free, keto versions. But in a small Paris kitchen, at dawn on the anniversary of their experiment, Margot and Victor cracked eggs into a bowl streaked with last night's dish soap, laughing at the sleep lines on each other's faces. They had no need for stolen dew or ciphers. They had muscle memory, bitterness cooled by devotion, and the steadfast rise of batter. It might last a lifetime. It might not. Legends promise, people practice. They folded trust into sweetness, poured anticipation into the pan, and believed, as ovens warmed and light blossomed over rooftops, that eternity begins exactly this way, one cake at a time.